Good day, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar on physical activity for the students from Hong Kong and the Philippines. I'm Carlos Among, your host during webinar 1 and part of the team working in this international collaboration project. For this video, I will share about the outcomes of the survey that we have accomplished at the start of the semester. So to refresh our ideas about this project, I am sharing with you some of the highlights of its objectives as well as the progress we have taken so far to support our efforts, the efforts of our universities to promote global citizenship and international linkage among our students and faculty. We organized this collaboration project for the following reasons. First, to establish a collaborative learning partnership between the two departments, the early childhood education and the family life and child development. Next, to facilitate the sense of global citizenship among students of ECE and FLCD. Third, to learn about physical activity experiences and trends from each other's countries or contexts. And I would also like to share that so far, we have completed 2 surveys and held our first webinar on physical activity in the early years. So the survey outcomes is what this presentation will be about. So for the objectives of the presentation, we have 3. So for this video, we intended to report on the outcomes of the 2 surveys answered by the ECE and FLCD students. As future educators learning about children's development, we deem that it is important for the students to look into their own experiences to better understand the concepts we learn in class. In this case, your own physical activity and literacy and your own global awareness. Second, this video intends to describe the similarities or differences between the physical activity and global awareness of Hong Kong and Philippine students. We intend to learn from each other's context and experiences, which could propel us to appreciate the possible reasons behind the differences or similarities. Third, we also aim to facilitate inter-class interactions among students of ECE and FLCD, and this time we will use another online platform for our interactions, and more details on this will be shared later. So we now go to the 2 surveys that I mentioned before that we have answered as the semester began. These 2 surveys include the Global Awareness Survey and the Physical Literacy Survey. So the Global Awareness Survey measures one's global awareness, citizenship, and appreciation for diversity. It also sought to know some information which relate to the students' past experiences in traveling abroad. On the other hand, the Physical Literacy Survey aims to measure future teachers' understanding of their personal physical literacy, their professional competence in handling physical activity in class, and their efficacy in handling circumstances in class related to physical activity. So at this point, we now go to the outcomes of the survey, and I will first show the profile of the survey participants. And please take note that the information were grouped according to the 2 surveys since these were implemented separately. So for the participants per country, we can see here that there are more participants from Hong Kong for both Global Awareness Index and Physical Literacy Survey. Around 70% of the participants came from Hong Kong, and around 30% of the participants came from the Philippines. This may be due to the differences in the number of maximum students enrolled in each classes. In terms of gender, majority of the participants for both surveys are female, which comprises of the 90%, while male participants are around 10%. 2 participants for the survey preferred not to report on their gender. Lastly, we also took note of the participants' year levels, and we found out that half of the participants are Year 2 students, which is followed by Year 1 students at around 30% and Year 3 students at around 20%. The mean age for all participants for the Global Awareness Index is 19.42 years old, while for physical literacy survey, it's 19.34. We should also take note that the two surveys had a different number of total participants, with the global awareness having 103 and physical literacy survey having 104. Okay, so at this point, we go to the presentation of the other data on global awareness. And as you could remember, you were asked on whether you have been in another country. We tallied the responses per country, and as seen in this first graph, we can see that the Hong Kong and Filipino students have somewhat similar distribution when it comes to travel experiences. There are more students who are able to travel abroad than those who did not. However, we also took note that there are varied reasons for traveling overseas. In the second chart, we see that majority who have had travel experiences traveled for tourism. And for others, tourism was sometimes accompanied by studying, and a small fraction of the participants traveled due to migration and due to combined reasons of migration, studying, and tourism. So we may ask, do Hong Kong and Philippine students differ in global awareness? We go further in analyzing the data and found out that the mean and median scores for global awareness for Hong Kong and Philippine students are different, with Hong Kong students having a median score of 5 and mean of 4.52, while the Filipino students has a median score of 6 and mean score of 5.68. So what does this mean? So as you can see, in a 7-point Likert, 20-item Likert scale, the scores closer to 1 means a lower global awareness score, and the score closer to 7 means a higher global awareness. So in this diagram, we see that the scores of the Philippine students in global awareness is higher than the scores of the students in HK or Hong Kong. So with this descriptive data, we ask, is global awareness index score significantly different per country? Upon running our analysis, the answer is yes. There is significant difference between global awareness index of the two groups. We may also ask, do global awareness index score differ on whether one has past travel experiences? So with this, we found insufficient evidence that global awareness differs from those with past travel experiences to those without. So at this point, I added here a think stop question, or a question that could help you think through a little further. So given these outcomes, what do you think accounts for the differences? And what can you say about past travel experiences and global awareness? Okay, so we now go to the next part of the survey, the physical literacy, and we compare how do students from Hong Kong and the Philippines compare in terms of vigorous physical activity, moderate physical activity, light physical activity, and sedentary activities. So to recall, for vigorous physical activity, this refers to activities that take hard physical effort and make one breathe much harder than normal. So we can see here that the mean days, so we asked the students for how many days in a given week do they engage in vigorous physical activity? And these are the answers that we've found out. So for Hong Kong students, the average mean days or the average days of engaging in vigorous physical activity per week is 1.05, while for Philippine students, the average is 1.32 days per week. So we can say that there are more students who are not so engaged in vigorous physical activity than those who do engage in physical activity, as seen in the graphs. For moderate physical activity, or activities that take moderate physical effort and make us breathe somewhat harder than normal, we also observe some differences. For Hong Kong students, for instance, they engage in an average of 1.11 days a week of moderate physical activity. And for Philippine students, they engage in moderate physical activities for 2 days a week. Okay, again, when we look at the graphs, we still see that these are skewed to the right. with physical activity tapering off for a higher number of days in a week. So there are less engagement relatively in moderate physical activity in a given week. So now we go to light physical activity, which refers to walking, to travel from place to place, and any other walking that one may have done solely for recreation, sports, exercise, or leisure. So here we can see another difference between Filipino and Hong Kong students. As can be seen in the summary measures and the graph, the Hong Kong students engage in light physical activity or walking for almost 7 days, or actually every day, compared to students from the Philippines who engage in an average of 3.81 days per week of walking or light physical activity. So clearly here, we can see the difference in the graphs, and we can see that Hong Kong students do more walking compared to Filipino students. So where can we attribute this preliminary result? Do you think it is related to cultural differences or to walkability of spaces or modality of classes perhaps, like online or face-to-face? So maybe we can reflect further based on our own experiences. So finally, we go to sedentary activities, or the time we spend at work, at home, while doing coursework or during leisure time. So this may include time spent sitting, visiting friends, reading, sitting, or lying down to watch television. So here we ask the students how many mean hours of sedentary time per day do they engage in these kinds of activities. So we see another similar trend for both groups. So both groups sit down for an average of 9 hours per day. And while this seems to be closer to each other, a further look at the data will tell us that for the mode, Philippine students sit for 12 hours per day, while most Hong Kong students sit for 10 hours per day. But both graphs also show how there were less students who sit for longer time. So for on average, it's 9 hours per day. Okay, so from the results in the previous slides, we can also think how our actual engagement in physical activities and sedentary activities compare with the recommended guidelines from the World Health Organization. Here we can recall that for adults like you, there should be at least 150 to 300 minutes or 5 hours of moderate activity per week, or 75 to 150 minutes or 1 to 2 hours of vigorous physical activity per week. So for a week, that may be engagement in daily brisk walking or aerobic exercises or sports for at least once or twice a week. We are also reminded to limit the time of sedentary activities like sitting down and to replace it with more physical or light activities, like in this case, climbing the stairs or walking. Okay, so overall, we also analyzed the physical literacy scores for both groups and compared them using statistical analysis. Okay, so here, for the personal physical literacy index, we take note that the lower score or the scores closer to 1 means a lower physical literacy, and the scores closer to 5 means higher physical literacy. So for mean score of HK students, it's 3.23, and the mean scores for Philippine students is 3.68. Okay. So looking at the graph again, there seems to be a similar trend for the two groups. However, further analysis suggests that there is significant difference between the physical literacy of Hong Kong and Philippine students. We also check whether one's physical activity patterns is related to the physical literacy scores, and we found out that PA, or particularly engagement in vigorous physical activity, is related to one's physical literacy. So our current evidence suggests that walking and moderate physical activity had very little to no impact on the PL scores or personal literacy scores. Okay, So we also note the other aspects of the physical literacy survey, and we found out the following outcomes. So first, for teacher self-efficacy, or one's perceived confidence in handling tasks related to physical activity, we found that Philippine students scored higher than Hong Kong students. Note that the scores closer to 9 means higher self-efficacy. So for professional competence, or one's perceived abilities in understanding physical activity and physical literacy, we also found out that Philippine students scored higher than Hong Kong students. So here, note that scores closer to 5 means a higher perceived physical competence. Okay. So running our analysis, we found out that there is significant difference between the teacher self-efficacy and professional competence of Hong Kong and Philippine students. We need further evidence to examine the possible reasons behind these differences. But maybe at this point, you can also reflect on why is it possible, why is it lower or higher for your situation or circumstance? Okay, so given all this information, we may also ask, what other factors potentially relate to the future teacher's understanding of and perceived physical literacy besides location? And we found out that first, teacher self-efficacy, or the teacher's perceived success in their ability to plan and facilitate physical activities and to handle challenges in class. So it impacts one's understanding and perceived physical literacy. So this may indicate that teachers who are more confident that they will succeed in facilitating physical activity will also have a better understanding of physical literacy. Alternately, teachers who have a good physical literacy will also have a better self-efficacy in terms of handling circumstances or physical activities. Second, professional competence, or their teachers' perceived abilities in promoting physical activity in early childhood settings, is also related to one's physical literacy. And similar to teacher self-efficacy, it's vice versa. So teachers with high physical literacy also tend to have higher professional competence. And third, engagement in vigorous to moderate physical activity, or the extent to which teachers perform vigorous physical activity like heavy lifting, aerobics, fast cycling, and moderate physical activity like a regular paced cycling, dancing, and brisk walking is also related to one's physical literacy. So the more one, we can say that the more one is regularly engaging in physical activity, the better outcomes and perceptions they will have towards PL. Or alternately, the higher the physical literacy, there's a likelihood that they also engage in vigorous to moderate physical activity. Okay, so what insights can we get from the survey results? So first, we obviously learned about the similarities and differences of Hong Kong and Philippine students. We took note, for instance, the differences in engagement in physical activity and in similarities in trends on vigorous to moderate and sedentary physical activity. Second, in terms of global awareness, although there are significant differences in the students' global awareness, there is also some evidence that the past travel experiences do not necessarily relate to global awareness. This could indicate that there is a lot of potential in raising global awareness through other means apart from physically visiting countries. So in this case, like intercultural interactions, where we can capitalize for sure the use of online platforms. So third, we also learned the extent to which we engage in physical activity in a weekly basis. We also identified some preliminary factors that relate to students' understanding of physical activity. But of course, we need to avoid generalizations, and we may need to perform other analysis and obtain more evidence to get a clearer picture of the actual relationship of these factors or variables. So going back to the drawing board, what are the future directions that we can work on? So first, as I mentioned earlier, we could capitalize on the availability of various online platforms to support global awareness and citizenship. Second, since this project is only our first step in Hong Kong-Philippine collaboration, we could definitely continue our efforts to encourage intercultural engagements and understanding among students and faculty. We could also benefit from investing in and spreading awareness on physical literacy as well as in accessible, doable physical activities, even at the level of pre-service teaching or training. And finally, we could conduct further studies to confirm and to add to evidence on teachers' physical literacy in early childhood education and care settings. So as I end my presentation and this video, I want to share with you another Think Stop time to allow us to reflect on our learning today. So to facilitate our interactions in the YouTube page, we invite you to answer any or all of the following questions. You can also leave a comment on the responses of your peers. So for our question, the first question, what made the most impression on you in the survey results that was presented in the video and why? Second question, as a future educator or child development worker, what specific steps can you do to further enrich your own physical literacy? And finally, you may also like to answer, why do you think it is important for future educators to be globally aware? Okay, so please don't forget to leave a comment in this video. You can also subscribe to this channel for more updates on research outcomes and resources related to the promotion of movement of young children. So thank you very much for watching. For more information about the presentation and the study, you may contact Dr. Catherine Capio or myself, Carla Saamong, in the email provided on the screen. So thank you again and have a nice day.